Hey everybody, what's up? And welcome back to my garden. I got a lot of questions on setting up this winter sowing low tunnel, so that's what we're going to be talking about today mainly, and going through the motions of getting my first kind of winter sowing trays started. If you've never done this before, this is an alternative to using the milk jugs. Simply, I couldn't use the milk jugs anymore just because my garden got too big and it was too difficult to sow all the seeds, so I needed to make the winter sowing method work on a larger scale. The first thing I am going to do is I'm going to pick a location that receives plenty of sunlight, and it needs to be out in the open, so it can get rained on, it can get snowed on, it can get whatevered on. This spot in my yard is south facing, so that is going to be ideal here as the temperatures begin to warm up in the spring and late winter. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to spread a layer of plastic out on the ground. The main reason that I am doing that is to keep the weeds down and to keep things like slugs to a minimum. When we create this low tunnel, we're really creating ideal growing conditions with humidity and warmth. So any grass under there is going to grow like crazy, so I just like to put a layer of plastic down. You can use black landscape fabric plastic, obviously would probably be the best use, but I'm already using all my plastic, so this is just what I'm using. It is just a regular 6mm plastic sheeting that we're using for our low tunnel as well. After I have done that, I am just going to put my hoops into the ground. These are 1/2 inch conduit hoops. These were bent using a hoop bender. I got mine from Johnny's Seeds. If you're interested in that, but you don't have to do this kind of hoop. You can make these hoops with PVC. You can get 1/2 inch PVC and sink these hoops into the ground, and it works just as well. Just make sure that the width of the tunnel is, wide enough to where nothing's going to break or, flail around or, or anything crazy. Safety first, as always on this channel, of course. The length of your tunnel can vary as much as you want it to. It's really up to you. It depends on how many seeds you are going to be sowing. Ideally, I like to keep my low tunnels at about, 3 feet tall. After I have done that, I am just going to be grabbing some 6mm poly sheeting. I just got it from the hardware store. It's not greenhouse plastic or anything fancy, and I'm going to be covering the structure with that plastic. It's essentially the same thing as making the large hoop house that we have in the backyard, but on a much more small scale. After I've done that, I have a couple of options. I am going to just secure the plastic with landscape fabric pins. I am just going to use the landscape fabric pins and push them right through the plastic into the ground. Make sure you pull the low tunnel cover nice and tight. We don't want any sagging or anything like that. Here you have a couple of options. What I like to do is just add a couple of vent holes to this low tunnel. The main reason for this is it does just allow that excess heat to escape if it comes to that, if things get a little bit too hot in there. When we have done this, we are ready to start putting trays into the low tunnel for seed starting and for germination outdoors. Since it is still winter here, the first thing I am going to start up are my hardy annual flowers. So some of the things that I didn't plant in fall, so things like straw flowers or bachelor's buttons would also work great. Tons of options here. I'm also starting some scented stalks. I'm going to try again with the scented stalks after losing all the ones in the hoop house this year. I am just going to take an open mesh tray. You see the open bottom. These are trays that were originally used for soil blockers. I found that this way is personally easier for me. You can use soil blockers, of course. If you choose to use trays that have individual cell trays, just be aware they can be used, but be aware that they will dry out much, much, much faster than these other open weave trays at the bottom. To sow my seeds, I am just going to put some paper down in the bottom so all my soil doesn't fall out. By the time we are ready to transplant these, that paper in the bottom will have decomposed and it won't even be there anymore. For now, it's just to keep the soil in the container before the roots, start to grow through it. I am going to make sure that my potting soil, I'm just using regular potting soil. Yes, of course, you can use a seed starting mix. I am going to make sure my potting soil is nice and moist. We want lots and lots of moisture in that because that is going to help us have the ideal conditions for germination. Simply sow the seeds according to the package. So if the packet says a flower needs sunlight to germinate, make sure that you are, surface sowing. Or if it says to bury the seed a certain depth, make sure you follow those directions. Of course, we want to follow those directions when we're sowing our seeds. After I've done that, I am just going to slip the tray into the unheated low tunnel and close it. A lot of people worry. They're like, it's really cold outside and I've got seed trays out there. As long as those seed trays have not germinated, you really don't need to worry because remember, we're starting our cold tolerant plants first. When it comes to cold tolerant plants, the seeds of those plants can handle the cold and they will be fine, with the exception of a couple things that don't do so well with cold and wet combinations, such as sweet peas. Sweet peas have a tendency to rot, so you do have to be careful with those, but most seeds will not have a problem with this, okay? It isn't until those seeds start to germinate that you really need to watch them and regulate your temperatures and keep a closer eye on what's going on in that greenhouse. Once your seedlings do start to germinate in their trays in the low tunnel, you're going to want to watch and monitor the daily temperatures. Anything under about 35 degrees Fahrenheit, I always keep my low tunnel closed. The temperature goes above about 35, usually about 35 to 40, we'll crack the low tunnel open and I will let some fresh air kind of go in and circulate and keep it open for a while. I found that this really helps keep the green algae growth down. It doesn't seem like the green algae hurts the seedlings or anything like that, but it seems like it does just prevent any kind of possible fungal issues that may occur in the hoop house to open it and ventilate it and let some fresh air in. Temperatures above about 45 degrees, I definitely open up the hoop house and we really want to focus on airflow and maintaining those temperatures. It's also important to remember that unlike the bottles and milk jugs, this winter sowing method will require you to monitor the moisture levels in this low tunnel, okay? Usually in the winter time, I do not need to water these trays in the low tunnels. Maybe I've watered them maybe once in the months of January and February before, but once March and April and the warmer temperatures start, showing up, you will need to monitor these to make sure that the trays are not drying out. That is so imperative. I cannot emphasize that enough, that these trays will need to maintain their moisture, and a good moisture, not a sopping wet, soggy moisture, but just that consistent wetness that we need for those seeds to, come alive and start to grow and germinate and turn into really, really beautiful seedlings. As the weather progresses, I can start winter sowing different types of seeds. For example, when I'm about a month out from my last frost date, that's when I will start to kind of winter sow my tender annuals, my tender plants. And in sowing those, it's even more important that you are watching the weather. If there is a projected frost, just to be safe, I always cover those tender plants with a frost blanket. Or if there's a predicted freeze, you might have to bring in, those trays that won't tolerate it for the night, just to be safe. Now, I realize that this sounds like tons of work if, you're not sure about it and all that. But comparatively speaking, it is such a game changer in terms of how many seeds that I can actually start outside versus how many seeds I would be able to actually start in my house under grow lights. Not to mention, we don't have to make the investment in grow lights, which is a big deal for me. That's really about it for this video. I hope that it was helpful and I hope it clears up a little more about this whole winter sowing method and winter sowing in low tunnels. I get a lot of questions from people, and sometimes people, are kind of abusive to me, like, this doesn't work, and I try my best to explain it, and I know for a fact it works. I've done it, I don't know, this is like the 4th year that I've done this, and it's really changed what I'm able to grow and how well things grow in my yard. So of course I want to share it with everybody. Try my best to get the information out there, but sometimes I realize I miss the mark. So if you do have any questions or comments, please politely or kindly, at least like respectfully, I don't know, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. I'm always trying my best to explain it. If you're not subscribed to the channel, be sure to subscribe. I would love to have you. We're just always trying to grow the channel here. We make all kinds of content like, garden stuff and maybe some DIY projects. Who knows, really. Be sure to share it with a friend. Share it on Facebook, all that good stuff. I hope that you are having such an amazing day, and I'll talk to y'all later. Bye, guys.